How long does it take you to read a book? Yes, this really is a question. Hey guys, my name is Rob. This is my mom Karen, and we are your hosts of Books, Banter, and Beyond. And yes, today we're asking the apparently very popular question around the internet: how long does it take to read a book? This seems like a very obvious thing because everybody's going to be different, but I think from what I've seen questions being asked, it's more of a how, why, and is it really a factor of have you been a reader for a long time? Are you a brand new reader? Because I think all of that will play into the ups and downs of reading. And I'll go off right off the bat because I was telling you right before we got on here. I will occasionally do more than one. Usually it's because we're recording a show, so we're reading for research purposes. But then I'll have a book that I just read at the end of the day for fun, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, whatever it is. Not as much usually because now I'm kind of enjoying more free time of doing other things. But yeah, I will once in a while pick up one or two, maybe three. And I think for me, it's because it's either maybe one I've read already, so it's easy to get through, or it's just a short book. I do enjoy going back to like young adult books that are shorter that you can get through because they're maybe it's only 200 pages, maybe it's only 300 pages, so they're shorter than regular, so you can go through them fairly quick. But I think the amount of time really depends on your style and your habits, I think. According to the internet, there's various reasonings for it. Obviously, we have the length, we have the complexity, which is obviously how easy it is to understand said book. We have the reading speed of the reader and the engagement with the material. So that's kind of where I think the habit for me comes in. Like I mentioned, the book could be as short as 200 pages or it could be 3,000 pages. It depends on what you're used to doing. I know a lot of people who did masters in school. They're reading a lot. I know Dad was reading 1,000-page books for doctor stuff. So for people who maybe were reading a lot of that, it might be more habitual because that's what they were doing for years and years at a time. If you are somebody who rarely picks up a book or maybe only picks up a book once in a while, you might go for the shorter end because it's not as much of a habit as would be for somebody who is in the business of reading regularly, right? Other factors can be, like I said, how often, how quickly you get through it, and if you do it, and if you're doing it for fun versus for work. I think that's a very big specification to make here.
Right. And I also think, right off the bat, if this is a nonfiction versus fiction, if it's something that's educational, scientific,
Yes.
medical, where you have to literally, at least I do, have to read it word for word with my underliner and then my pencil and then going and rereading,
Right.
that's going to take so much more time. And it should, if it's something that's instructional, I think, it should take a little bit more time, right? Than
Yes.
fiction books that it's a story that's being told. And I can just, and I've changed my reading style and my reading habit.
Uh-huh.
I can literally get so enthralled and so engulfed in that book that I would read it till it's done and just keep going. And so I think it's an interesting question. How long does it take to read a book? I guess it depends on what kind of book it is.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off what you said. If you're in a science-based job or a medical-based job or anything where you have to learn the facts, obviously you're going to reread over and over again, and you're going to take your time because you're in a position where your physical doing can affect something or somebody, right? So you have to make sure your
comprehension is there.
Exactly. You have to be super clear that what you're doing, you're not going to mess up. However, if you are just a fiction reader, an author who writes books, then you have the ability to pick and choose what you're doing. I don't know what the percentage is of, let's say, an author reading versus non-author is. And to be honest, I feel like so many authors are writing, they may not get a chance to read as much because they're busy writing new stories, right? But I have heard of people like King or like Martin, the guy who wrote Game of Thrones. They do read a lot when they can. So even those who have a busy schedule of writing books, they try to put in, I don't know, maybe 5, 10 books a month just to get some reading out, maybe to use for research, maybe to use for pleasure. I don't
Mm.
know, but I believe that even those people that don't have time to in that business, they still read for the purpose of maybe knowing what's going on, maybe going, hey, right now people are getting into more romance. Maybe I should dip my foot into that now. Maybe it's just a matter of, hey,
It's
people are getting
research. It's
tired
research.
of
Right.
my this.
Right.
Maybe I should switch over to this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it depends on what you're doing, but that's a very good point there. If it is something you're doing for a living that is an important job to be doing, you have to scour the pages
Right.
many times. If you are just reading just to read, you might be able to flip through multiple books because you're just doing it for enjoyment and you're not necessarily
Yeah.
doing it for anything more than yourself.
Or you took the Evelyn Wood speed reading class of the 90s or the 80s, whenever that was, and we all learned how to speed read, which, when you think about that for a minute, the idea that you should speed read.
It makes me think there was a guy, I think he's in the Guinness Book of Records, and he was on the news once back in the 90s, and his record was being able to read, I think, faster than any human on Earth at the time.
Why?
And it's an interesting thing to do. But again, yeah, I always think like, is he comprehending? Is he remembering? Is he
Right.
actually enjoying? Or is he doing it just for the fact of being the fastest reader on
Right.
the planet? I
Right.
don't know. But you're right. There's a point, there's a purpose of reading, and that purpose should be actually taking in what you're
So
reading.
I have to ask you. So you said at the very beginning that, when we had spoken about it, that you sometimes will read one or two or maybe three books at the same time. So from the vantage point of you reading 2 to 3 books at a time, how do you keep them straight? How do you remember where you left off?
That is the $1,000,000 question,
Right.
right? I don't know if I do this subconsciously or not, but usually I'm reading two very different styles of things. So, for instance, my end of day book is usually a history book. Right now, I'm reading a book about books. It's basically how the book was invented. And then I'm actually buddy reading with somebody a series from the 90s called Earthsea. And that's just a fantasy book, very short, made for 15-year-olds at the time. Um, so it's kind of two separate things, and it makes it easy because I can focus on the fantasy one and enjoy the story. And when it comes to the history, if I do need to go back, I can Google and go, wait, what did I miss? And kind of recheck in there. So for me, I think it's a matter of splitting the genres or the styles between the two. If I read 3 Star Wars books together, that might be problematic because it's the same characters, it's the same planet, it's the same whatever. That might get me a bit mixed up. So I think for me personally, the way that I can do more than one is I make sure that each book is separated enough from the category that I'm not blending one with the other, I think.
Well, more power to you. More power to you. I sometimes don't remember where I left off from the day before on one book. So, but that has to
I
do.
mean, I will still go back and just make sure I remember what happened in the past chapter anyway. But yeah, I see how most people look and go, why? How? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just,
It's
it's
just you.
fun.
It's just you. Well, this is always, I love this. And again, guys, we want to hear from you how you read and how do you sit there and what we want to hear from you. That's the most important point. Go check out the bookstore, NextChapterBookstore.shop. There are all different gently used books in all different categories. You can search for them at the top when you get onto the site. Put your name and email address in there so when Rob has some great stuff to send out, you're on the list to get it. Trust me, he does not spam. I'm on him all the time. Why don't you email us more? Anyways, go do that. Rob, any last thoughts?
I enjoy the back of the writing of how this works, and we will definitely talk more into not just books, but basically how the process of everything goes. Because I think it's important when you're learning anything to know what happens on the back end to then maybe help you understand why you're ending up with the product
Right.
that you have at the
Right.
final.
And appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll see everyone next week. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you on Books, Banter, and Beyond next time. Goodbye, everyone.